This is the I Love Success podcast. I'm Peter Jarboh, and I have made a vow to myself to help as many people as possible to achieve their dreams. Let's get started. Welcome to the I Love Success podcast. My name is Peter Jarboh, and I am the host, and I have a big mission. I want to help 10 million people in 10 years to achieve their dreams. To do that, I need people like you that want to accomplish dreams, and I need guests, amazing guests that are game changers in the world. Today's guest is Dr. Belisa Vranich. She's the founder of the Breathing Class, and she's also written the book Breathe. She's a public speaker, a clinical psychologist, and a lot more. In today's podcast, we spoke about breathing, we spoke about life, we spoke about love, and creating things that you feel good about. Just a simple thing like saying, I love you. Do you have a hard time doing that? Maybe you'll learn how to do it today. So kick back, relax, and let's enjoy this conversation that I had with Dr. Belisa. Welcome, Dr. Belisa Vranich.
Thank you for having me. I like getting called an incredible human being. Those are big shoes to fill. I hope I can meet your expectations.
Isn't it crazy? Because on this podcast, I've met so many people that have come so far in their life. Yet, when you tell that to them, it's like, no, I'm just doing my thing. And I love that. That's so cool, right?
Yeah. Well, I feel like in certain areas, I called myself an idiot savant the other day, and someone said, no, you're just specialized. And it's because there's some things I do really well, and then most other things I don't do so well. But the ones I do well, I do really well. So breathing, and I make a really amazing chocolate lava cake.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, everything else, not so good, but those two I'm great at.
That's so good. And can I just say, I love these moments because there's so much going on in the world, and when I have the opportunity to sit face to face to an incredible human being just like yourself and just talk, that gets me excited, because in one way I think it's almost like meditation, because you have to be in the moment. So Thank you for sharing this moment with me.
Ooh, that's a really interesting thought, is that being in a conversation with someone when you're present is sort of a collective or a little group, a dual mindfulness. I like that. You have to coin that.
Yeah,
because if someone's really captivating of what they're saying, you are in the present, and we're usually not.
And I think also this podcast format creates the time to really focus, because usually when you talk, there's so much going on, or you look at your phone, or I try not to, but sometimes we do it, we'll blink or something like that. And that's why I just love this. So I'm not going to talk more about that. But Belisa, who are you really? Behind the title, behind the breathing,
everything?
Who are you?
Well, I'd like to say that I'm someone who's found what I'm meant to do. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you figure out really what you're meant to do here now, it's really an incredible feeling. And I mean, I spent probably the first decades, lots of years doing things I liked but that didn't feel absolutely perfect for me, and that felt like a mission, and that every day I would wake up and go, this is absolutely what I love to do. And that doesn't mean that if you have a job and it's just a job, and then you have a life outside your job and you have family and hobbies, that's somehow less better. But finding what I want to do and actually having this vocational bliss where I work all the time. Actually, I'm never not working, and I don't have so much of a life outside of my job, but it's okay. It actually works for me at this point in my life. So I'm someone who's in love with my work and surprised every day at how interesting it is and how it really can help a lot of people.
That's cool. So how did you find that mission, and why do you want to do that? Because a lot of times it starts with pain. I don't know if it's something to do with you, but
that's true. Discomfort is a big motivator. And in general, as human beings, unless we're uncomfortable, we don't move. And some people can stay very uncomfortable for very long. So I was uncomfortable. I was grinding my teeth. I was looking for a way to balance my stress. Stress had been pushing me and energizing me for a while, but there comes a moment in your life, I don't know if you've hit this yet, where stress actually becomes your enemy. So there's a fuzzy place where it's still pushing you and you're still sort of addicted to it, and then it crosses over. Sometimes it has to do with your age, sometimes it has to do with an accident, but all of a sudden you realize that you're not controlling your stress, it's controlling you. And I had a moment where I realized, oh, I am not controlling my stress anymore. It absolutely is controlling me. And it was when I went to the dentist and I found I had been grinding my teeth. And the dentist said, it's not a structural problem with your jaw, it's actually related to stress. And I was angry, which is actually part of the problem, is that when I got told that I wasn't controlling my stress, that I had a problem, that I was grinding my teeth at night when I had no control. So I really had to step back and say, okay, it's time to make some changes in my life. So I looked into breathing through yoga, and it's changed a lot. This is not just breathing through yoga, but it came to me because I was trying to deal with my own stress and my own pain. So you're right on target.
So what did you do at that point in your life? What did you work with, and
I took out a really big loan, and I got my teeth fixed. So, and then now I wear this really sexy night guard as well. So I started trying to deal with my stress, which meant, most people go, they have a drink, or they try to figure out meditating or whatever. I went to yoga, and I knew I was looking for a yoga class that was a little bit different. I needed one that just went with my personality. So it took me at least a year. People think, you just drop into a yoga class, but you have to find one that really jives with you. And I found one where I remember walking in and they were playing the Beastie Boys. And I said, I really like this class already. And then the person teaching it was really knowledgeable about anatomy, and I liked that as well. And then when we did the breathing exercises, I don't know why I loved them. And then there was this, and this usually happens, is there was this synchronicity of things where a good friend of mine said, I just took this breathing class with a guy named David Elliott out in New Mexico. And that sounded a little out there for me, but then she said it again. And then I remembered the breathing that I liked in yoga. So I said, you know what, let me go check this out. I've nothing to lose. Loved what he taught me. Amazing human being with amazing knowledge. And then I continued to study on my own and came about my own method and what I'm doing now.
Beautiful. And before this, what did you do before?
I was a clinical psychologist. So I did pretty much everything within clinical psychology. So I worked with violent ex-convicts during parole. I worked with kids who needed to get IQ tests in order to get into schools. I worked at a magazine as a sex and health editor. So you name it, within psychology, I did it.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is still psychology because there's a lot of psychology in watching the way someone breathes and fixing their breathing. But I was a psychologist and a child and school psychologist too. So that's where I started.
And why did you want to get into psychology?
You know what? I hate to say this because it's not what everybody wants to hear, is that I had a calling for it, but I really, when I was in college, I wanted to be a DJ, and I worked in radio stations. I worked at WUSB and WXYC, and I wanted to be a DJ. And I was a French major. I loved French. I actually worked for Jacques Cousteau for a little while, and those were the things I liked doing. And I chose psychology because I couldn't quite make a living doing those things, and I needed to pick something that had a lot of flexibility as a degree. Everybody in my family is very driven when it comes to academics, so I just went back to graduate school because it just seemed to be the thing I needed to do, because I quite didn't know what I wanted to do, and psychology gave me the most choices. So it's not that I had this passion for it, it's just sort of was a way to sort of continue educating myself while I figured out what I wanted to do.
Beautiful. Yeah. I think psychology is so important, right? Yeah. And it is such an interesting, like the human being and the human mind. And we're going to talk about breathing mostly this podcast, but I just want to go back to who you are. And so let's go back a little bit further. How was life growing up?
Oh, let's see. So I come from a pretty quirky family. My brother is an archaeologist, and he is a Machu Picchu expert.
Wow.
He's at Berkeley, but his passion is Machu Picchu in that area of the world. He's an amazing, amazing guy. He's kind of the real Indiana Jones. My mom and my dad were both college professors, come from a long line, 4 generations of college professors. And my mom is Cuban, my dad's Serbian. They met at Berkeley in the 60s, where else? And I grew up with a family that was really different than most people around me. And I always thought we were so peculiar, and maybe we were peculiar, but I didn't realize we were sort of ahead of the times. So for instance, we juiced. We had a juicer. Nobody juiced then. We had a compost pile. We recycled. We did all these things, and mind you, this was like the 70s and 80s, that people now are doing sort of normally and they think is cool. But we did it back then, and it was, I always thought my family was the kind of quirky hippie family, but really we were kind of ahead of things. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. So your parents, they came to study and to work at Berkeley, and that's how they met?
That's how they met, yeah, that's how they met. And we speak Spanish at home. So both my parents decided to speak Spanish to each other so that my brother and I would speak Spanish as a first language, really. And then we learned English, in preschool or wherever, yeah.
Wonderful. And have you gone to Cuba and Serbia?
I have gone to neither. My brother has gone to both, but I haven't gone to either. It's on my list of things to do.
I think like Cuba is on my my dream destination. Serbia, I'm from Macedonia, so I've been to Serbia a lot of times, and Macedonia, and I love that area too. Yeah. So I think you have 2 great trips coming up.
I have to, and I'll probably end up going and doing some kind of breathing workshop there as well. But there's still so many places in the States I haven't seen. So I haven't seen the Grand Canyon. I'm going to Nashville next month. I've never been to Nashville. So there's a lot to visit.
There's so much to explore. Yeah. One thing that I got very curious about was when I read about you. You were talking about the anatomy of breathing, and that we lose that very early.
Yeah.
Can you just walk us through what does that mean and what is that?
So what I say usually is that we breathe in a way that's anatomically incongruous. So I like to look at things in a very basic way from the bottom up. And when I was studying breathing and looking at the way people were breathing, I knew that, my background is not in anatomy, remember. My background is in psychology. But I was watching people breathe, and we're taught that the diaphragm is your main breathing muscle. But I was watching people breathe and reading a lot and realizing that we're actually not breathing the right way. We're not breathing the way we're supposed to given our anatomy. So mechanically speaking, we're not doing the right thing. And I did my due diligence. I really read up on everything I possibly could, and there was amazing, amazing texts out there. There's a book by Blandine Calais, which is fantastic, beautiful drawings. Donna Farhi, Leon Chaitau. I have a list of about 15 beautiful, beautiful books that have been out for a very long time that my teacher trainers have to read. So I started reading them, and pieces started coming together. So obviously, that we're not breathing well, isn't something I particularly discovered, but being able to describe it in a way that people can then actually understand it and do something about it is what is a little bit different. But there's some amazing, amazing research out there, and like I said, descriptions of what bad breathing can do to you, and lots of research about breathing muscles, and it's really about bringing all that together, referencing everyone, and making it something that everybody can understand and apply to their own bodies.
So how, for a person who, I'm into this, I've done martial arts since I was a kid, I do yoga, I know that breathing and meditation is key, and I believe that meditation will grow as much as yoga did maybe 10, 15 years ago. So I think meditation is gonna just explode. In a city like Los Angeles, a lot of people are already meditating and breathing and thinking about those things, but a person who's not into this and don't know what it is, what could they do? What small little thing could they do to breathe better, and how can it affect their life?
Sure. Well, the breathing I teach is not very meditation-y. So it's interesting because people, when I first started saying I teach breathing, they'd immediately put their hands into a yoga posture and sort of om or, think it was something like that. Yeah. And it's not. I teach breathing, although I do teach a meditation in my class, I focus more on your breathing in daily life. You're breathing when you're in sports. You're breathing when you're running. You're breathing when you sit. You're breathing when you're trying to get to sleep. So what I'm looking at is really how does breathing and the use of your diaphragm and your muscles, your breathing muscles, affect your health? So while I teach meditation, it's just one of the things that I teach. So when you slow down and actually look to see how you're breathing and start understanding what's going on, you realize that many of the medical and psychological things you're dealing with, whether that's a full-out medical problem or just symptoms that are annoying, come back down to the breath. And I can give you an example. Acid reflux. Okay, you talk to people and everybody seems to have bouts of acid reflux, or at least have acid reflux all the time. But we're not stopping and saying, what is going on with our esophagus that all of a sudden it's not, in the history of mankind, our esophagus is not working anymore, so much so that we need medication. What's going on? That's not normal. So let's stop and think about that for a second. For thousands of years, people have not had acid reflux, then all of a sudden we have acid reflux. So one reason is, yes, we're chewing too fast. We're not chewing enough and we're swallowing whole chunks of food that have not been chewed up. But the other problem is that your diaphragm is actually a secondary esophagus. So if you're not using your diaphragm, your body is not getting that secondary esophagus to keep food and acid and bile down in your body where it should be. So once you pause and start looking at what's going on with yourself and realize there's a connection with your breath, then it becomes really, really interesting. So once we stop thinking about breathing as this thing, that has to do with clouds, or it has to do with, being in the moment. It does, being present, and it's not songs that talk about just breathing. No, it's muscles inside your body that are keeping things where they should be, that are massaging your lungs and your heart and your digestive organs, that are keeping your spine healthy, that are keeping you balanced. It gets really interesting.
Yeah, breathing, I think it's pretty simple. Breathe or die, right?
Exactly. But we can walk around with barely breathing. That's what most of us are doing, is that we're walking around kind of like taking really half-assed little hamster breaths, and we're living, but just barely.
Yeah, no, I think you're so right, and I think a lot of people are up here all the time. And what we are trying to do in martial arts, in karate especially, we breathe in through the nose, and we breathe all the way down to the belly. We call it saikatan. And then we breathe out through the mouth, which is a little bit different than yoga, for example, where you do all nose work. But can you just talk a little bit more about the tools for breathing, and
Sure.
like for a person that don't know this, how can they use your method and improve their breathing?
Well, you just summarized it there perfectly. I got to tell you, is that when you take a breath, having the expansion come from the lower part of your body. And for instance, when I talk to people about bringing awareness, below their belly button, that's your second chakra, if you're into that kind of stuff. That's your anatomical center. It's your lower dantian. This is like a place of your body that's really important. And the middle of your body should expand on the inhale. That's just it. Is that the biggest part of your lungs are between your nipples and your belly button. Okay? So if you look at any animal on the planet, it's going to expand in the middle and contract in the middle. We have taken that, completely warped it, made it absolutely outside of the design of our human suit, and now use our shoulders to breathe up and down, which makes no sense. So really, you should breathe in through your nose, and the middle of your body should expand. Your shoulders don't have to move on a daily basis unless you're taking an enormous breath. And then on the exhale, you should narrow. And the middle of your body should be really flexible. Because if your ribs and your rib cage isn't flexible, you're not going to be able to take a good inhale, and you're not going to be able to take a good exhale. And most of the symptoms and maladies that older adults have to do with bad exhales, with having too much residual air in their bodies.
So that's on a daily basis. When you walk around, you should aim to breathe in through your nose all the way down to the belly.
Exactly.
And breathe out through your mouth.
You can breathe out through your mouth or you can
nose.
breathe out through your nose. It doesn't matter. But the whole point is that people are confused by belly. Like, why am I breathing into my belly? And this is what I started looking at as a psychologist, is why don't we understand what's going on? So you say down into your belly, you know what that means. But most of us think, and I was like this, is that I said, is there air going into my belly? I don't think so. And then, why is my belly moving at all if I'm breathing into my lungs? So there's all this confusion around anatomy. And in general, I just don't think, I don't know how it is back home for you. You probably have better education when it comes to anatomy, but Americans are notoriously bad with geography and probably anatomy as well, which is that if you inhale and your diaphragm flattens out and expands your body, your belly is also going to expand. So it's called a belly breath, but there's no air going into your belly, and your belly's only moving because your diaphragm is. Now, when your diaphragm's been locked up because you've been bracing your body or trying to be skinnier by sucking it in, you actually have to take a belly breath, which means you have to push your belly out or let it go, and then your diaphragm follows. It actually starts getting unlocked and expanding. And if you think about it, the best part of your lungs are right above your diaphragm. So right where your ribs are, in the front of your body, well, the sides and the back as well, that's the best part of your lungs. You shouldn't be doing anything with your shoulders. It should be that you inhale like your dog or your cat, your middle expands, and then your middle contracts. Does your belly move? Yes. And that's why we call it a belly breath.
Yeah. So why do you think we breathe up? A lot of us, we breathe here in the chest. What is that?
Stress, culture, and myth. Okay, so I'll break it down into that. It's like it's 2 weeks of lecture in class, but if you get stressed out, you start breathing in a fight or flight kind of way, which is the top of your body, shallow, short breaths. So if you continue to be stressed out, or the world continues to be stressed out, or you're just on Instagram all the time, which stresses your body out. Most people don't realize that being on Instagram, your body does think it is stressed out because you're focused, you're paying attention, you're taking tiny breaths, and even though you're entertained, you're still breathing in a stressed out way. So stress is part of it. And then we have the myth that sucking in your belly is good for you, that bracing your body somehow makes you feel better against stress. And then there's culture, which is everywhere where you look, everybody is sucking in their guts and they're puffing up their chest. It's your typical superhero selfie pose. Chest puffed up, gut sucked in. So the combination of those things mean we're going to take that breath that is perfect and in the middle of the body and push it up to the top by the neck and shoulders and completely disrupt everything that's going on inside.
Yeah, I think it's kind of sad when you look at the world. We have come so far and yet we have forgot to breathe.
Yeah.
Which is number one, because if you don't breathe for a couple of minutes, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
And do you think we're killing ourselves when we breathe up here? Shortly?
We are, actually. And it's interesting because I'm starting to write the second book now that has to do with breathing. And I was looking at an article that was in Scientific American. Sounds like an oxymoron right now, but it's not. And it's about how our brains have evolved, how we have bigger brains now, and why we have bigger brains. And we really need to look at evolutionary medicine and culture to see why we have changed this breathing, how we are suffering because of it, and how we're going to adapt or continue to suffer and die. Because we're now breathing in a way that makes no sense given our body, so what's going to happen? Because we are suffering because of it. Back pain, digestive disorders, lack of sleep, all sorts of things in the middle of your body, plus having irregular and unbalanced oxygen and carbon dioxide, it's really causing havoc inside our bodies.
Do you think we do too much as human beings in this day and age?
We try to multitask, which has been shown is completely impossible. We're addicted to stress. which is ridiculous. I don't know how much we really do, but we do have the impression that we're doing a lot, which at the end of the day, I mean, you've seen these articles on older adults, what would you have done differently in your life? And it's, I probably would have played more, I probably would have been more present, but I think that technology has given us this impression that we need to keep running and that we need to do more because there's this pressure to keep producing and keep ahead and not be left behind. And I got to tell you, New York, and I think all major cities, but New York is probably one of the worst places ever, is that if we could not sleep, if we could just not sleep and not eat and just work as fast as we could, the fear behind all that is doing bad things to us. Because at the end of the day, it's really about how much fun you had.
Yeah. No, you're so right. And I'm thinking about this all the time because you want to create something in your life. You want to have a good life, but you want to have fun at the same time. And that's where passion comes in, right? So you have a passion for breathing. Why do you want to help people with this?
It's so, for me personally, it's so immediately gratifying. And it's so hard to find a job, and especially in health, that's immediately gratifying. Usually you have somebody come in and you have to talk about your weight, or let me talk about your pH, or let me talk about your anxiety. And it's a grueling process. They have to try, they fail, you try another way of, and it's just a long process. With breathing, we do it so badly and it's so extreme as far as how dysfunctional it is that even in one session or in one chapter of the book or one podcast, someone can make a change that actually ripples and affects their entire health, their entire life, really. So one of the reasons I love it is, again, I guess I am a child of short attention span, is that it really is amazing for me just to see how people get better so quickly.
Yeah. And are you pro meditation? Do you meditate as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you meditate?
Well, I do the meditation that I teach, which was taught to me, which is an active meditation, which is a breath-led meditation. So in my class, I call it meditation for people that can't meditate, because some people can meditate and others can't. And I think there's a large percentage of people that can't meditate, and the whole concept just doesn't turn them on. It feels like, what am I doing? I'm wasting time. It's frustrating. And I was one of those. So traditional meditation is fantastic if you can do it. The meditation I teach, and that other people in the world teach as well, it's certainly not a new concept, is let me breathe to be able to center myself, and then I can actually be in this altered trance state, which is meditation in itself.
Yeah. Are you good at that? Like in daily life? Are you good at being in the moment and being in that state?
I am because I love what I do. But there are days where I feel like, good grief, like there's so much happened today. I really wish I could slow it down and process it. And I journal. For me, journaling is really important. You write things down. I've always been a big fan of writing things down to heal, writing things down to what's called chronicle the chaos, and just enjoy the moment more, because there are so many, I really feel like you have so many interactions just day to day that are so good that you kind of want to just savor them and relish them a little bit more. So writing them down helps that.
Do you do that at night or in the morning? Or?
No, at night.
At
and
night?
It's completely free associate. Too many people who try to journal, try to spell check and reread it. I've never reread anything I've written. It's really about writing it down just to think, I hadn't realized that pattern. Oh, or that really works. Or, oh, I neglected this point. Or just, wow, what a great interaction that was. Like, or how much I love this friend. I mean, haven't you been together with friends? I think recently there's a really nice trend in really telling our friends that we love them. And I've never been a super mushy person, but I'm getting mushier as I get older.
That's good.
But just friendships, I think that there's a lot of attention to the importance of time spent with friends lately. And that just makes life so much sweeter when you can sit with like-minded friends and talk about things that make you happy and things that are fun and struggles and, daily life.
I think what we are talking about here today is connection in different ways. And a lot of us forget to connect with our own body. I was thinking about this. I feel like I am a connected person, but I went to my first yoga class about a year ago now, I think, a little bit less, when my grandfather passed away. So I didn't feel like doing this gym and martial arts. So I just saw a yoga class. I'm going to start this. And when I did that, it kind of changed my perspective, because sometimes I was standing in a pose and I was looking down and feeling my big toe against the floor. And I was like, I have not felt this sensation. And if you're listening to this, think about this yourself. When was the last time you really felt your body, or really felt your breath, or was really, really in the moment? When was that? Because a lot of us, we forget that. Is that what we were talking about? Is that what breathing is?
Yes, at least part of it for sure. But think of that idea as that, when do you check in with your body? Is that we never check in with our bodies, because most of our work, if you work where you're using your body to work, you're definitely thinking about it more. If you're sitting at a desk, less. But if you're sitting in front of a computer, or you have your handheld in front of your face, you're not in your body. You're completely out of your body. You're not paying attention. You're numb. And I really think that injuries that come from neglect of our bodies have risen in the past couple years, because we don't know when we're in pain until it gets really painful. We don't know when our judgment of our bodies, of what's okay, our intuition, we're just completely out of touch with that.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, but I think what you're doing is so good, because it helps so much. I realize myself, when I really take a step back and think about my breathing, sometimes I do just a couple of breaths, and it changes the whole perspective of me as a human being. Mm-hmm. It might sound deep, but I feel, oh wow, I feel my lungs, I feel my body.
Yeah.
And that feeling makes you a little bit centered, I think.
Absolutely.
And I'm a little bit curious. You talked about stress, that we are almost addicted to stress. How can breathing help with that?
Well, I think that our addiction to stress is something that's counterphobic. So when you are stressed to the point of fear, instead of taking a step back and trying to fix the amount of stress and fear that you have, sometimes we just try to run faster. So for instance, not that hot yoga or spin is bad per se, but if you're an anxious person that's addicted to stress, the last class you need to go to is a spin class or a hot yoga class, because it's just going to actually exhaust you, but it doesn't necessarily calm you. So we have to look at stress in a different way. Again, technology and addiction to technology is such a big deal right now, and it does put us in a stressed out state, even though to us, and especially kids who have grown up with the internet, that's just normal. Is the amount of information that's running through quickly, the amount of tragedy that happens daily that we hear about, that's just normal to them. And it's good to take a step back and take a deep breath and all of a sudden realize, ooh, I'm here, I'm in my body, I kind of like this human suit that I have on, I'm feeling present, and it's a relief. So it's interesting, because most people, once I can get them to take a deep breath, go, oh, all right, like, oh, I'm here, I've arrived, I'm in my body, because you're not in your body a lot, you're in your head a whole lot, but how about like just feeling like your soul is in this human suit, and you're feeling like, oh, okay, well, I feel good being in this, and this is a good body, and it's a strong body, and I'm going to take care of it more, because I got to be here for 80, 90, or 100 years.
Yeah. So what could the listeners do right now, like to be better at breathing? Do you have some tools?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I'll give them away. I don't even care. So one thing you have to think about again is that the middle of your body is where the best part of your lungs is. So most people breathe up and down with their shoulders. And the fact is that your shoulders were never meant to be breathing muscles. Your shoulders are just shoulders. You should just let them be what they are. So when you inhale, and this can make people feel a little uncomfortable because you feel vulnerable. If you've been bracing your whole body because you've been stressed from whatever age you started getting stressed in, or maybe just because you're prepared. I know that I'm not necessarily stressed out at this point in my life, but I like feeling prepared when I walk around the street. And I will brace. I'll find myself bracing, but it's more of a preparedness stance. So just relax the middle of your body. Now, if you're a little bit heavy, you're probably sucking it in, which means that just let the middle of your body go. I know I have people say, well, I don't want to let it go because it might stay there. And I will promise you, if you let your belly go, it won't stay there. You will be able to suck it in again later if you want to. But what I want you to do is inhale and relax the middle of your body. And then on the exhale, I want you to squeeze. So normally we walk around all squeezed all the time. Just squeeze on the exhale. And your core will actually get stronger if you breathe this way. It's kind of funny that if you tell folks, yeah, let your belly go for a couple seconds, but then on the exhale squeeze, you're doing crunches all day long if you're doing that. And it's really good for all the muscles that are in your middle, but they're also good for your digestive organs, which are right in there as well, and your pelvic floor and hips. So everything, it's good for everything in your body. So right now, if you want to try this, which is put your hands on the middle of your body, okay? And then on the inhale, either push your belly into your hands or relax it. So you want to go inhale and then exhale, narrow. And the exhale, your whole body should narrow. You should squeeze all that air out. So inhale, big belly, good. And exhale, squeeze, good. Inhale, big belly, and exhale, squeeze. Now, that belly breath is the intro breath. It's just to start you getting used to the idea that that's where the breath should be. Later on, once you get this, you don't have to puff your belly up because no one wants to look at that. It's not the sexiest look. You'll be able to inhale and exhale all the way around your body because you do have lungs in the back of your body. And especially as a fighter, you don't want to be inhaling forwards because you don't want to soften the front of your body, right? Yeah. You don't want to telegraph what you're doing to the other person. So you want to be able to keep the front of your body still and tight and breathe through your back. But that's an advanced breath. Yeah. For your average person, just inhaling, puffing up your belly, then exhaling, squeezing, narrowing it is what you want. And for some people, you'll try to do this right now and go, wait. This is actually the opposite of what I want to do. Why does this feel so weird? And it's weird because you spent maybe 10 years, 20, 30 doing the wrong thing. So changing this and going back to the way you should be breathing is really important. And again, one of the easiest things to do is take a look at your cat. Got a cat walking around? Just take a look at it. How's that cat breathing? Got a dog walking around, lying down? Watch him breathe. Got a child under the age of 5? Watch them breathe and just do what they do because they're doing it right.
It's interesting when you say that because it all makes sense and I haven't thought about it, but the thing when I breathe in, I breathe out, and almost in martial art, when you punch, you breathe out and tense the whole body. So it's like, I've been doing this, but in everyday life, it's so easy to forget. Yeah. So this, what you're doing is really great. You're actually educating us on how to not forget breathing in the right way because it's so easy, especially when you're up in the head. And I met with a guy called Sean Stevenson, and he said, my wife taught me to go from the head to the heart. And I kind of love that because we're so much in our head, right? What are we thinking about? Oh, the bills. Oh, how can I grow my business? How? Why did Belisa post such a beautiful picture on Instagram? Why is my friend traveling all the time? Why are we thinking about all these things when doesn't really matter, right?
It doesn't really matter, but most people don't know how to get out of their heads. So how to get out of my head? How do I be in the present? How do I be mindful? Super easy. Take a deep breath, because that all of a sudden gets you out of your head, because now you're near your heart, right? Because your heart's actually right on top of your diaphragm. So if you breathe with your diaphragm, you can actually feel a little bit emotional. Because if you've been bracing all this and all of a sudden you take a deep breath, you might even feel like, I feel a little like emotional. I feel relief, but I've had people all of a sudden shed a tear and go, whoa, what's going on? I'm not sad. And it's just relief that all of a sudden now this enormous muscle that's in the middle of your body is now being used for what it's supposed to be used, not just crunched up because you're trying to look thinner.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm thinking about one thing, because a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs, athletes, people that want to succeed in something, and they're sometimes under a lot of pressure, or they have a speech, they have a presentation, they have something like. Do you have any breathing techniques to use when you're nervous and ready to perform, to calm yourself?
Well, two things. If you're someone who gives a presentation or talks or lectures, is that you want to be able to have enough air to make it to the end of the sentence. And I had somebody come in to see me once, and he said, and he was a CEO, very important person, and he said, I am so anxious when I speak, and it's because I don't know if I'm going to make it to the end of my sentence, and it's very embarrassing to run out of air mid-sentence. So that was fascinating. To me, that's fascinating, because the first thing I had to do is look at his breathing. Do you have a big inhale that's going to allow you, because a sentence when you speak is an audible exhale. So are you taking a big inhale that's going to allow you to have a very long exhale? And he wasn't. Because if you're breathing up and down with your shoulders, you're not, even if you give a big dramatic inhale and you puff up your chest, it's still not an efficient breath. So the best breath is one that's in the middle of the body, like we just did. Also for your nervous system. I've been saying this a lot the last couple of weeks because it's just so hits home, is that the way you breathe is the mechanism that controls your nervous system. So if you needed a button or a knob that controls your nervous system, it's the breath. So if you're trying to calm down and you don't know how to breathe, well, you just don't have the mechanism. You're trying to calm yourself down with nothing, just thoughts, which doesn't work. So when you know how to manipulate the breath, you will be able to calm yourself down regardless of the presentation you're giving, of how hostile the audience is, of whatever's blowing up around you, you'll be able to calm yourself down. So that lower body breath that we just took not only is going to give you enough air to be able to make it to the end of your sentence and project your voice, but it's also going to keep you calmer than that one that you'd be taking with your shoulders. And it has to do with the vagus nerve. Is that the vagus nerve starts at the top of the head, and when it notices that you're breathing with your shoulders, it puts you into fight and flight, which means higher heart rate, higher blood pressure, higher cortisol, lower immune system. So those things will only change when you start breathing that lower body breath. That's a belly breath. It's an expansion on the inhale and a narrowing on the exhale.
And that's the same for people that want to perform in any field, right?
Any field.
Yeah.
Any field. But it's interesting. For instance, if you have an actor and they want to be anxious or nervous and be convincing at it, you can actually use the breath to get them to be more anxious. If you are a fighter and you're too calm, and you've seen, this happen to people where they're actually kind of numb, or they want to be wake up before they get into the ring or on the mat. And you have to use a breath to sort of wake yourself up. When I first started teaching, it was military and law enforcement that called me. SWAT, Homeland Security, Border Patrol, DEA, and fight dojos. And I remember that I was surprised because one of the questions I had, and it was from DEA, is what breath can we use to wake up? Because they spend a lot of time, DEA agents spend a lot of time watching and in your car. And it can be incredibly boring and really hard to stay awake. So what breath do we use to be able to stay awake? So it is the mechanism for your nervous system.
It's interesting. Have you heard about priming?
Yes.
Like when you do those big breaths like Tony Robbins style, is that something that you are pro, like to wake up and to get energized? Or what do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting because most breathing that people teach comes from yoga. So that's a very bellows breath type of breath. Tony Robbins is obviously a big believer in the breath, which is super cool. But most of the breathing techniques that people use, they don't say it, but it comes from yoga. Yeah. What I do is I took breaths from yoga, like Kapalabhati, but I also looked at other sports. So I looked at martial arts, I looked at free diving and surfing, I looked at singing as well. So I looked at all different places where breath was important and where there were studies about it, because everything I do has to have some science behind it. So, yes. So the answer is yes, is that kind of breath is good to be able to wake yourself up, along with what he does is a lot, the power posing as well, which works for short term as well. Yeah. And I can imagine that Tony Robbins probably has enormous lungs.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting that you looked at all these sports and activities for the breathing, because that is something that you have to be quite intelligent to take the things where you need the breath and put it into a class or a program. And I really, really like that. So how do you see yourself evolving with your company and your mission the next 5 or 10 years? What do you want to do?
I mean, everyone that comes in is so different that it's actually what I like the challenge that everyone who comes in to see me is very different one from the other. So for instance, I'll have a mom bring in a really anxious 10-year-old. What can you do with my 10-year-old? For some reason, they're really anxious. I might have a CEO who comes in and says, my golf game, I have to golf for work because it's part of the culture. Can you get my golf game to be better? Or I'll have someone say, hey, my cardio is fantastic, but I want to be able to be better than my opponent. Can you get my endurance to be better? So there's always something else to look at. So for instance, I had somebody come in to see me last week and they were a billiards player. Now I know about breathing for precision because I'm actually sort of obsessed about breathing for precision. It's really interesting. And that's whether you are, you're shooting on a range, or you are a surgeon or a tattoo artist or a golfer. So with the billiards player, it was really interesting because I was forced to really understand billiards. So I had to be able to get into his shoes to see what was going wrong with the shot, what was going wrong with his thought process and the way he was breathing throughout the game. So for me, it's always evolving, and that there's always someone else with a different situation that I have to learn about. And, that to me is thrilling because I'm never going to be done and I'm never going to be perfect at it. And there'll always be someone else to learn from, or some other article to read, or some other little bit of information that I hadn't thought about, that I hear or that someone says. So evolving in that way and continuing to evolve. I think that everybody needs to look at life that way, is that once you start getting to the place that you know everything and you're the best at what you do, it's only a downfall from there, because we have to think about each other as this collective where we're each getting information that we can help each other out with. And luckily with the breathing community, if I can say that, there are people who are really generous and open and share information with each other. And then there's people that aren't, but it's kind of nice right now is that, especially with Instagram, is that there's a culture of, hey, here's what I've done. What does someone else think about it? I'm thinking about the other day, someone posted something about drinking coffee before you take a nap and how that works. And I wrote, for coffee, for me, the smell is such a wake-up smell that I don't know if I could drink coffee, take a nap, then wake up. So I wrote that in an Instagram post, and a few people said, I'm going to try it. And I thought, that's great. That's the way we should be, is, I have this bit of information about the thing that you really like doing. Do you want it, or can I introduce you to someone? And I'm sorry, I just went off on a huge tangent. But anyway.
No, I love that, because this is what I want to do. I want to share, knowledge. Why are we sitting here today and sharing this? Because knowledge is something, if you have knowledge but don't share it, it will die. Yeah. But our conversation today will stay forever. And what you do when you write a book or when you work with a client, help them, that actually goes and multiplies, right? And that is how we can move forward in life. And I think one thing that is so cool with you and a lot of the guests that I have here is that they're so open to give. It's not about you don't talk about taking, you're talking about giving. And the more you give, the more you get, I believe. So are you a spiritual being?
Absolutely. And
how has that affected your life?
Well, I teach breathing, which is, spiritual and breathing they're sort of the same thing, I think. I'm not religious per se, but I'm spiritual, and it comes from my family. I think I'm a big believer of volunteerism. So with all of my patients, when I had a clinical practice, they had to do volunteer work. I remember my mom taking me to do volunteer work as young as I can remember. So for me, spirituality has to do with serving, volunteer work, kindness, collaboration, and God is love. If you're going to ask me what God is and if I'm spiritual, is that when you have moments of love, whether that's being with a friend who you just think they're an amazing person and you say, God, buddy, I love you. You're like, that's God to me. And I think you have to find a spiritual part of yourself. Even if you say I'm not a spiritual person, you have to find something. And it may be that you just get emotional during a sunset, or you love your dog so much it just makes your heart melt. It can be anything. Yeah.
It's interesting that to be able to give love, that's not easy for a lot of people. Why do you think it is so hard for some people? I can say I was like that. I'm much better, but I was so afraid of saying that I love you to someone or things like that. Why do you think that is?
I remember being the same way. I had a godson, a friend of mine's son, who I love very much, named Ashton, and Ashton would say I love you all the time. He was little, he was 5, and I remember feeling slightly uncomfortable, because I thought I love you, when do you say that, when do you not? And it just, for whatever reason, it didn't come easy to me either. And he taught me to say it. He in 9/11, taught me to say it, is that you have to tell people you love them. And it can be, love doesn't have to be romantic love at all, because sometimes that's lust and we just mess it up. But telling people you love them is really just important to do it, as often as possible. And once you start saying it, it starts feeling really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Look,
hard.
I get all emotional.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. How can you work with that? Because we're talking about spirituality, and then we're talking about breathing, because essentially breathing is something physiological, right? Mm-hmm. But how does that connect with the mind and the spirituality?
Well, I think that when you're talking about love, it's about being vulnerable. Yeah. Is that you may tell someone you love them and they may not say it back, or you may feel all of a sudden kind of vulnerable at saying I love you. What happens if they don't? What happens if they don't say it back? What happens? And if you can just think, I'm going to tell them, and it really doesn't matter what they think. Yeah. With the breath, unbracing your body and relaxing can feel very vulnerable. And I know that sounds strange, but if you've been bracing your body because life is hard or you've been hurt, and you all of a sudden let the middle of your body go and take a deep breath so that all your organs can relax and your heart can relax, and that also is a loving maneuver towards yourself. Yeah. But it also puts you in a very vulnerable state, because now and even for a fighter, it's like now you're open, you're soft. Yeah. So there's analogies all over the place.
It's so difficult, and I encourage everyone who's watching this to take a moment to just breathe and try to be honest with yourself and your life, who you are. Even if you're going through something that's bad, or you have a hard time saying I love you to someone, or whatever it is, try to break those walls down for just a second, just to see how that feels. Even if, like, I believe if you can be totally naked with who you are in any situation, that is like the greatest gift you can have, right? But it's also so difficult because you're afraid what will people say. What happens if I come in here naked today? What will people think about me? Maybe not literary, but
depends if it's good naked or bad naked.
Right?
You know? It could be a good reaction. It could be a bad reaction.
You never know.
I think that with saying love you, I think I would say, because again, I always go back to being a practical psychologist, a dynamic psychologist, is that I would practice with your pets. And I would also practice with, the way I did is I would go, love you. And then adding the I is really hard. But once you go, love you a couple times, and then you say, I love you. And if it doesn't matter what the other person says, if you're not, it's kind of a Buddhist thought of like, if you're not attached to the outcome of what your I love you is, it's just a statement. So if you can start with your pets, is like you take your dog and you just say, Spot, I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you. And you practice saying it out loud so it doesn't freak you out. And then you start with people, love you, man. Like, guys, it's easy. Love you, bro. Love you, man. But try saying, I love you. That's a little bit harder. So love you, bro is easy. I love you, a little bit harder. But if you say, and I know that I've done this before, is that I say I love you and then I step back or I step away. Because I don't really, sometimes it makes me nervous. Is the other person going to say, I love you back? Is it going to make things uncomfortable? And you just say, I love you. Yeah, it's good. And it's interesting when you start saying it to your friends, and they're friends that are just friends, that feel like family. And I do it all the time now. And again, because 9/11 in New York, things changed. And I know there's a lot of people that were feeling like, wow, I really wish I would have said I love you to this person who left in the morning and didn't come back in the afternoon. Or to this person I hadn't seen, this friend that I hadn't seen, that I was supposed to see next week, but now I'm not going to see. So you have to live every day like you mean it, like it's the last one, because it could be. So, even if you're not sure if you love the person, just say it, because, you might not be able to say it if you decide you do later on. Yeah.
What do you mean when you say live life like you mean it? What I love that saying, but what is behind that? How should a person live life like they mean it? What should you do?
Just don't wait to do something fun. Don't stop waiting. Just like, it's so hard to get up and do things because you're tired. And I know I go home, and if I go home and it gets dark, I'm at home. It's really hard to get me out. I'm super stubborn that way, but you have to force yourself to do things that are fun today. Living like you are living, not living like you're on automated, not living like you're forced to do this, not living like you're just resentful of the whole process. Like, if you only had today, or if you only had a week, how would you live? What would you get done? We need to live every day like that. Yeah.
That's great stuff. And you also said one thing that I really like: don't be attached to the outcome. And that's something that Bruce Lee said, and a lot of fighters say, if you're attached to the outcome, you will probably lose, right? And so how are you not attached to the outcome? Because it feels like that's everything we are. Yes. Not all of us, but mostly, like, oh, I'm having a business because I want to create this, I want to make this money, or I'm going to talk to this girl because I want to kiss her. You're always 3 steps ahead. How do you work with that?
You have to love the process. You have to find something about the process that feels good. So, for instance, I've gotten very obsessed with deadlifting lately, and I have a goal for myself. So, deadlifting and powerlifting is really interesting because you are very goal-minded, but you also have to be in the moment, in that that I'm going to practice, I'm going to lift, I'm going to try to get to that number that I want. But you have to enjoy the going to the gym, the seeing friends there, the other exercises that you do, the fact that you lost weight or gained weight if you're trying to gain weight. So find things in the process that you can celebrate so that your definition of winning isn't as narrow as just the kiss from the girl.
Yeah.
Because we need to win more. We need to set up situations where we're winning and we're enjoying more. If success begets success. So if you make yourself succeed throughout the day, it just makes you a happier person. You're more in the present, and you're not as attached to that thing out in the future that you think is the ultimate thing, the quest.
I think you're so right, because I've met so many people that have accomplished crazy things, and I've accomplished a lot of the goals that I really want in my life. But when I look back, the goal, it's fun to accomplish, but it's everything else, It's having those meetings with people. It's struggle. It's losing and getting back, right? Mm-hmm. It's learning, and all of those things are great, but it's so easy to forget because sometimes we just look at that goal far, far away. Mm-hmm. I guess that's why we're here, to practice, to enjoy the process.
To enjoy the process and really make sure you set up situations for yourself that you're getting what you want and you're enjoying life. So yes, that goal down the line is really important, perhaps, but set it up so today you meet a goal. And it may be that goal, you go into it and you realize, I don't really want that. I don't really want that. I've realized in this process that isn't, this beautiful car, this beautiful wife, that Talking Heads song, is that's actually not what I want. What I want is more time. What I want is quality. What I want is, to be able to eat that dessert or whatever it is, but to make sure that setting up your life so that meeting your goal isn't so off in the distance that you're just waiting for that day to come and not enjoying the process.
Is it important to get to know yourself, to know what's right? And how would you recommend that?
That's lifelong. I think that, I laugh at myself all the time in doing things. I'll say something and I'll think that's not completely true, or you said that yesterday, or I think you do have to look at yourself, but I think taking feedback from other people is really important. And in general, we don't ask for feedback and we don't take feedback. And I just think you can get so much information from your friends and your enemies as well, because they're all teachers, right? But really ask questions and see what the answers is, because we have so many people who are searching inside themselves, searching and going to all these retreats and doing all these things. And why don't you just ask your friends what they see? Ask them your good qualities and the things you need to work on. You would get so much information if you asked and honestly wanted to know and didn't get upset about the answer.
That's hard. I think we get really defensive a lot of times because we want to be seen as the person that we got our shit together, but a lot of times we're not, and that's okay. So I have only 2 more questions. I had a great time with you. So the first one is, imagine you're 87 or 93 and you're just sitting in a rocking chair overlooking the ocean, or maybe in a favorite spot of yours.
I'm going to be deadlifting at 87, so don't put me in a rocking chair somewhere.
Okay.
Come on, man.
Belisa, you're deadlifting. You're at Gold's Gym here in Venice, deadlifting at 87. And between sets, you get that small little opportunity, and you start thinking about your life and thinking, what do you want to see? What do you want to have accomplished to say, okay, I could die deadlifting today?
That would probably be the best place to go, right? I've got getting to my goal with deadlifting. To me, helping or healing or educating is why I'm here. So just having touched as many people with information, and I don't need to know about them. It's really nice when I do hear about them, but having helped someone else feel better about themselves and live life more fully as a psychologist or as a breathing teacher is why I'm here. So just the most people I can give information to or help is my goal. So at that point, or today, I'd be fine because the information is out there. And I know, because I hear every once in a while someone will say, remember me, my life has changed so much because you helped me get to this. So it's really about how many people can I touch and how I help them ripple through their families and their relationships, because it's all about the ripple, really.
Yeah, I love that. And that's beautiful of you. And the last question that I have to you, Belisa, is if I ask this to all my guests, and that's just one thing that they can do after watching or listening to this to get started with their dreams and to get a little bit closer, what would be the tool that you would say, do this now, and you can at least get started?
I think, now this is going to sound a little bit corny because I haven't talked about this during the whole podcast, but I think inertia is such a problem, and gaining momentum to get to where you want to go is crucial in getting to your dreams. So I would say, this is not a primal scream experiment at all, but I would just take a pillow or a sweatshirt and scream into it. And it's more like a scream. We used to have rituals where we would emote, think of haka, or think of just
actually try that. That was really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. But I think that we are so disconnected from our emotions of passion that, you talk to someone, you go, you passionate about this? And they're sitting and they go, yeah, I'm passionate, really passionate. Well, no, get up and take your sweatshirt, take something and just scream into it and then start moving. Because we need momentum. And the way we live right now doesn't give us momentum. It actually makes us sit longer. And we need to get in there and feel that feistiness, that flame, that passion. And I think that just taking your sweatshirt and screaming into it and remembering I'm strong and I want to get this done, that can really help you do that.
Amazing. So thank you so much, Dr. Belisa Vranich, I'm good at that last name, for sharing with us today. It was incredible. Thank you so much.
Great questions. I got to tell you, I had a ball.
Yeah, thank you.
Really great.
Yeah, and thank you, everybody. And remember what Belisa said. Don't be so shy. Come on, out there, scream it, live it. Because we need momentum, we need to go after what we want, and we need to breathe. So thanks everybody for listening in, and thanks to our sponsor Panos. Check them out at panos.com. If you like this podcast, I'm sure you did, share it with friends and family so they also can breathe more and live more fully. So thanks guys, and talk to you soon. Bye bye.